Today we've got something of a treat. We're going to be playing with the Casio DG-20. I myself have yet to try this instrument out. I just got back from borrowing it from a guy named Max. In fact, I'm going to have him introduce the instrument.
So this is the 1987 Casio DG-20. It is a guitar-shaped keyboard, essentially. It sounds like this until you turn it on, and then it sounds like this. And so it's got all these contacts under the neck, and basically you're just pressing buttons, and then there's this little sensor in here that detects when the string is plucked, and that's how it works. You play chords.
So that's the basic gist of it. Max also warned me that this instrument is very hard to play.
It takes a very fine, sort of precise kind of playing.
Okay.
Because if you're just a little bit off, you'll be hitting the wrong fret.
Before we try this out, can we just take a moment to appreciate how cool this instrument looks? Looking down at this thing, I almost feel underdressed. Okay, let's try this thing.
It feels weird. Does work. Sometimes notes don't trigger, and I'm also noticing that sometimes you play one note and several notes trigger. Let's try some of the other sounds. Keep wanting to bend, but it doesn't seem like bending is really a thing on this. I'm gonna take these sunglasses off. You can play multiple notes at the same time, you can really play chords. Jazz organ. I don't see myself using that very much. That is a trumpet, just in case you were wondering. You know, this is kind of cooler than I thought it was going to be. I expected it to really be glitchy, and it's only kind of glitchy. Okay, I can't play this without a strap, and unfortunately there's no strap peg here, so I'm gonna try to take it apart and install a strap peg.
It turns out there are 16 screws to loosen. Once I've got them all removed, all I have to do is pry the two halves apart. It's interesting to see how the components are laid out. The electronics consist of several circuit boards which are spread across both halves of the shell. I spent way too long digging through my parts box, trying to find just the right screw to attach the strap peg. Of course, we get there in the end. And with that, all we have to do is screw this thing back together. I'm eager to try to use this thing to actually make music.
Okay, we've got a strap now. Let's try to make some quick music. Oh, it feels so strange to play this. Let's just do a very simple backing. As you can see, I've got Ableton Live up and running. Okay, that should be enough. We're just gonna make a loop in Ableton. And now I'm just gonna try to play some kind of melody over it. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with the sounds on this. Obviously, it's super 80s sounding, especially when we add reverb, but it's much nicer than the sounds on, say, this Casio keyboard that I have that was also made in 1987. This instrument was clearly made with a lot of love. They really wanted this to be cool and good, and these sounds were clearly chosen for this product. It's just gonna play forever. I guess that's why there's a mute button on it. Of course, the musical possibilities don't really end there. This has a full MIDI jack, and we can take this and plug it into the Polybrute or any synth that has a MIDI input.
In fact, let's give that a shot right now.
Okay, I've got this thing hooked up to the Polybrute, and you can hear what it sounds like.
Not surprisingly, this introduces a lot of possibilities.
I ended up filming an hour of footage, most of which is not very compelling, in which I slowly made my way through all of the Polybrutes presets. And every time I hit up against one that had a short attack time, I ran into the same frustration. Ah, those double notes.
For now, let's just try to stick with pad sounds.
If this guitar has taught me anything, it's that the idea of having a guitar controller for synthesizers is a good one, actually.
Unfortunately, it's pretty much impossible to play anything very precise on this thing. And on that note, I have a confession to make.
So there's actually a surprise to this video, and that is that I didn't actually just borrow this guitar from Max. I borrowed another guitar as well. The Casio MG510. So this is essentially a different spin on the same idea. This doesn't generate any synthesizer sounds at all. It's basically just a totally regular electric guitar. It has regular electric guitar pickups, but it also has this additional pickup, which can detect what notes are being played and convert those into MIDI note data. And just as with the DG-20, that MIDI note data can be sent to a computer or to a synthesizer.
By the way, this was released in 1989, so 2 years after the other guitar.
Okay, so I just plugged in this guitar, and my first reaction just on playing like a few notes is that it's amazing. It's just, as a guitar, like forgetting the MIDI part of it, the guitar itself, the neck feels so good. I have it plugged into my amp. Okay, let's try out the MIDI stuff. Okay, I have no idea whether or not the audio is recording. Pull a decent sampler library in. So what happens if I strum it? Oh, this is already so much better than the other one. And here's something else that's really cool about this. It seems to be actually detecting the intensity of the notes and playing different velocities in the MIDI. So very impressive tracking, actually. Let me try to pick another sample and just see how they sound. Maybe tongue drum?
That's cool. There's something surreal about playing a tongue drum using a guitar. I'm going to try to use the motor synth for the lead sound. So my overall verdict of this second Casio guitar is that it's really great. My favorite is when you combine the sound of some MIDI instrument, in this case the tongue drum, with the raw sounds coming from the electric guitar. It's funny, this idea of controlling synthesizers using a guitar is a pretty old one. In fact, the first synthesizer guitars came out literally in the 70s. In the early 80s, Roland made its own MIDI guitar system, and then of course later in that decade these two Casio instruments came out. It seems that every few years another company has a go at this idea, and playing this instrument, it's easy to see the appeal. Between synthesizers and sample-based instruments, it opens up a ton of possibilities for guitarists. Of course, it's not without its drawbacks. Any pitch to MIDI system is going to have latency. In other words, I pluck the string, and there's a slight delay before I hear the sound. In order to compensate for that, I have to play ahead of the beat. Still, it's a small price to pay for having access to a whole world of sampled sounds. I want to thank Max Goldberg for lending me these instruments, both of which are really cool for different reasons. By the way, I've sampled the retro futuristic sounds of the DG-20. Those samples are available for free to anyone. If you'd like to support what I do, you can join the Patreon. It's dirt cheap, and each month you'll get a different sample library that is exclusive to patrons. Okay, I think that's it. See you soon.